So we are on Facebook Live, and we're really blessed to have Rebecca Winn with us, who, you know, she's an award-winning landscape designer, which just totally warms my heart because I love all the chapters names of her books, of her book that I'll mention. And she's also obviously a writer, if I'm mentioning her book, and an artist. And in fact, she had a long marriage, 25 years, and then that dissolved. And in that dissolving, she was guided on one of those stressful days, as we can all relate, have them in our lifetime. And she walked into a Unity Center. And now there's being a shift where she is now combining with science of mind and also unity, and has had quite a spiritual journey. So I have invited Rebecca Winn, and please welcome me as I welcome. Thank you so much, Rebecca.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I feel really blessed that you came. And when I read your book and the first time I spoke with you, I said, Rebecca, these are such intimate, transparent chapters. And then what did you share with me about it?
Well, it started, so people ask me a lot of times, how does it feel to write something so vulnerable? And the reality is that they started out as journal entries. So I actually didn't think anybody else was going to be reading them. That being said, they only started out that way. They're just some of them that are journal entries. But I was always writing to myself. So I think I think that's why I was able to be so honest and vulnerable, because even after the book sold and it was clearly, going to be read by other people, I already had a writing style which was writing to myself, and so I felt safe.
I love it. And like the others here, many here won't know, I'm going to pull it up on Amazon. I'm going to highly recommend this because it actually shifted so many things in my marriage in a healthy way. And I have been married now for a long, long time. How's that for an answer? So I've been married for 23 years, and there's a link about the book. I highly recommend reading it because what I got was the way you bring the book, 100 Daffodils. And I love that chapter that you went out and I won't say it all, but you did go out and get yourself that gift. And the signs that you experienced while you were writing it. Can you share how spiritually you felt that divine guidance? Because there's others here that are writing as well books. And so how did that come to you around seeing the signs and knowing those signs were fit for that God was guiding you?
You mean in terms of having it be a book?
In terms of throughout your book, you take us back to your garden, utilize those signs in the book.
Yeah.
That is just precious how you've done that.
I have to say I realized I would not have actually known this if you'd asked me this 6 months ago, but I realized that I have operated this way at least my entire adult life. And the reason that I know that is because I actually came across something that I had written in 1982-ish. So long time ago. And it was the exact same style where and again, it was a journal entry. I had hurt someone's feelings, a friend of mine. And I was just sort of processing it on paper, but I did the exact same thing that I do throughout the book, where I see something sort of obscure a lot of times happening in nature, but I can find a parallel to it as what's going on in my life. So that apparently is just something that I do.
I love it, but I do. Well, and like everyone here, again, like, of course I've read the book, so, I have that flow. but the transparency and the vulnerability of how you've shared, it doesn't matter if you haven't had a 25-year marriage. It doesn't matter if, you know, you're not connected with the fauna and the flowers, and you are still at your core. Oh, it's choking me up. At your core, you have this beauty in this way of weaving it together. And so, can you share, like, because I know there are a couple others writing a book. And the reason why I put out the title of going from using spiritual practice, which is obviously something you've done since a very early age, and it's threaded throughout your entire lifetime and spoken to you through the animals, through nature, which many here are very connected with nature. And as a result of that connection, you manifested like this master manifester, this exceptional book contract. Can you speak to everyone here about that, please?
Yeah, boy, I tell you what, I have been saying ever since my book sold, which it actually sold in the summer of 2018, because it takes a long time in the, you know, traditional publishing world. But I have been saying I should be the poster child for set an intention and release the how. Because the how of my process is just this Rube Goldberg, you know, path. And it is, I believed that, the set an intention and release the how, but I had no context for what that could actually look like. And I can tell you, I have context now. And what I know for sure, because I'm one of these people that I very much adhere to the pray and move your feet. You know, don't just pray and lay back and wait for it to happen. Do something. What can you do to move it forward? And the tricky bit about that is that you can sort of feel like you have things in control. Like, you know, I'm moving my feet, I'm praying and moving my feet, and so I'm making this happen. But I've really figured out that I had maybe 2 or 3 ideas of how I could make that happen. You might have 0, depending on how big your dream is. But the universe has an infinite number. And one of the things that was so powerful for me through this whole process was learning to reconnect with my intuition, because I am very intuitive, but I was married to a very concrete attorney, you know, kind of guy who literally would say to me, just the facts, ma'am. I don't want to know how you feel. I want to know what you know.
Wow.
And so my intuition was constantly being invalidated and shut down. And I myself ceased to believe it. But once I was out on my own, and once I got into the New Thought community, where holy moly, so many people are so connected to their intuition that it's like, you know, being in Hogwarts, I really thought, well, you know what, I really think that this is a part of me too. I just need to reconnect with that. So the path from kind of being a nobody from nowhere to, you know, having my book go to auction and sell for a lot of money to a big 5 publisher was a process of trusting my intuition and taking the next right step. Because there were things that I did that I had no idea why I was doing them. No idea. But something would just drop in to say, do this, this is the next right step, and I would do that. And probably the most pronounced was when I got an email from a woman that I had just met. I did not know her. I didn't have any interest in what she was doing, but I got an email blast. It wasn't an email to me, it was just an email blast saying that she was doing some workshop in Southern California. And about how to do what she does, which is have a subscription-based website. And I didn't have any interest in that. But the minute I looked at that email, I thought, yeah, I'm doing that. And I actually usually have kind of commitment phobia around buying airplane tickets. I'll go online, I'll find my seat, I'll find my flight, I'll get all the way to the buy button and then I won't press it. But with that instance, I just did it. And I was booked to that workshop within 15 minutes of getting the email. And I had no idea why I was going. And while I was there, I was like, yeah, I don't really know why I'm here. And at dinner one night, everybody was going around the table talking about what they wanted, you know, to get from this workshop. And I said, that got to me, and I said, you know, I'd really like a different literary agent. And I'd like this one to be in New York, because I had an agent, but she was in LA. And everybody was like, what does that got to do with anything that we're doing here? And 45 minutes later at the night program, a woman that was sitting at the far end of the table that I'd never exchanged words with came up to me and said, I want you to meet somebody. She took me over. She introduced me to this kid. I mean, he was, you know, young, like in his late 20s, early 30s. She said, I don't know if he knows any agents, but, you know, he's kind of a super connector, and I just want you to meet him. And within 4 days, that guy had connected me with the woman who is now my agent in New York. And that guy wasn't even at the workshop. He had just come to that evening event because he was friends with the woman that was doing it. He was only there for like 15 minutes. You know why? To meet me, so that he could introduce me to a person who introduced me to a person who introduced me to a person who connected me with my agent. It was the craziest thing. Like, you cannot script that.
You
only,
can't. No.
Only God can do that. I mean, I truly believe that.
I love it. And I love that each one here really gets it, because we've all gotten inner promptings. And I want to encourage you to really take in what Rebecca's saying here, because this is like that validation for everyone. And that's why I brought Rebecca on, because her book just authenticates your feelings. You know, when you get wrapped up too tight, when you want to strangle something and you instead walk outside and see what's going on with the animals in nature, or you look at the signs in your life. So what I realized when I brought you on was, it's the authentic, vulnerable side. You know, a friend of mine, Reverend Celeste, we call it, oh my gosh, not the V word, you know, the vulnerable. We just give it a letter now. And so it's been this thing that once you are transparent like that, and your book, and you have it in audio as well. So please, everyone, 100 Daffodils, definitely read it, buy extra copies. That's what I've already, she's got the audio, and it's her voice, even better. So you hear something different when somebody auditory. I actually rewire faster auditory than, even though I do like to read, but I rewire better auditory, and Jeanette's all into that, and she gets, oh, look at that, Veronica's in. I've got it right here too. And yeah, it's just a beautiful book. And like, listen to a couple of these titles. Just the titles are great. Living in Sleeping Beauty's Castle, Part 1 and 2. I Am Autumn. The Itsy Bitsy Spider. First Touch. Bright White Nights. Letting Go. Like, it's just the still small voice. It has such a presence that I don't think I've ever read a book like yours, Rebecca, and I'm a voracious reader. I can eat multiple books in a week. I just love to eat them. And I think yours took me 3 days to eat. And then I didn't want to read the last couple chapters, so I took a couple of days off, and I'm like, oh, I gotta be finished. So I do definitely recommend it. But tell me how that felt for you, like being that vulnerable. Like, I know you've now been through the Carl Jung, the foundation, they're now reaching out because you have a lot of Jungian connections throughout, as well as the spiritual, like us with the science of mind. So express for the others, like, what did that do spiritually in your growth when you let go and you were transparent the way you have been?
Well, so I have two things to say about that. The first one is that my editor, who is amazing, and very powerful. She's the editor-in-chief of the hardback division of the biggest imprint of one of the big five. So she's a big, big deal. And when she read my first draft, all the notes on the side, most of the notes on the side were like, wow, this is beautiful, or gosh, that's so wise, or I never thought of that like that. But every once in a while, there'd be that one that would say, not my favorite, consider cutting. Well, as I read through all of her notes, every one that she kind of didn't like as much were ones where I wrote myself was not very likable, as not very spiritual, as kind of bitter and angry. And so I called her and I said, hey, I noticed that these were the ones that the only ones that you had any sort of feedback about. Did you do that on purpose? And she said, oh, did I do that? I completely wasn't aware that I had done that. And I said, yeah, as a matter of fact. And she said, wow. She said, I'd really have to go back and look. But she said, I think maybe what happened was that by the time you got to that part where you were accessing your anger and so angry, I had fallen so in love with you that I felt kind of protective, and I didn't like to see that about you. And I said, well, I love you for saying that. And I'm really not willing to take those out because I can't whitewash how rough the experience of transformation is, how difficult it is, that we say walking through the fire, and you hear that so much that it kind of loses its impact. But when you think about it, it's searing, and I just really felt like those were important. So I actually fought to keep all of that vulnerability in. And I will also say that as I was fighting to keep all of that stuff in, it wasn't a fight, really. I mean, all I had to do is say, yeah, no, I don't want to take that out. She said, okay. But as I was defending that, I was not thinking about what that was going to be like to have many strangers reading.
Thousands of people knowing all of your dirt. Just think of that, everyone. Thousands of people knowing your dirt.
Yeah, well, they don't know all my dirt. But they do know the range of
Right.
my experience. And I actually think that is very powerful for people. So it's been fine so far. I mean, basically, the way that it has sort of shifted me from a spiritual perspective,
Yes,
is that I have, and this wasn't a moment. This, I've observed it sort of fading over time, but I have a lot less attachment to how I appear. And I actually put makeup on for this, but almost every interview and podcast that I've done, I haven't. Like I just haven't. And that is new for me. A year ago, every single time I was on camera, I would have made sure, that everything looked as good as I could get it to look, and now, I've twisted my hair up when I just got out of the pool and come on and done a podcast. and that is very liberating. So, and I do think that is a part of a spiritual expansion, because it is a release of ego. It's a release of mask. It's a release of managing your image in a way that is new for me. And I'm very grateful for, because there is one piece, as you know, that's about body image.
Yeah.
And one of the things that happened to me, actually, I haven't ever told anybody this publicly before, but as soon as the book sold, when it sold as big as it sold, which I had not anticipated, honestly, one of the first things that popped into my mind was, oh my God, I can't go on national TV at this weight. So there was a big national marketing and television and PR campaign that all fell apart because of the pandemic. But that, and that haunted me for months. And I care less about that now. It's not that I don't care at all. And certainly then that I don't care about my body and my health, but that isn't what that was about. What that was about was image maintenance. And I do care much less about that.
Well, and I can hear, like, don't you all just feel that charm, that depth in her, that authentic part of her? I just love that part of you, Rebecca. And I know that we all have a shadow self, whether it's a Jungian term or whether, everybody's got the
Sure.
shadow pieces. Although I'm still going to wear my girly dresses with or without makeup. I even sleep in them, oddly enough. It's just who I am. And it's been I think it's what keeps that childhood part of me alive.
Yeah, I'm very girly too.
And I love that. And that's just who I see. But, I know that we have to wrap it up. And I was just looking here. What did I really want to make sure that deepening? Yeah, I think probably the biggest thing is your spiritual practice through this while you were writing your book. Can you share a couple of spiritual practices before we close so that we give the listeners some food for the Daffodils 100 until they get it read so that they can feel that empowerment? I definitely say audio, or if you program better, auditory, to go and get the audio. And I'm actually going to get the auditory, like the audio version, just because I learned auditory to accompany my other one. But can you give us a couple of practices, please, Rebecca?
Well, one of the ones that I have found really liberating is to take a sheet of paper, and I personally turn it horizontally, and I draw a line down the center, and on one side I put mine to do, and on the other side I put the universe's to do.
Nice.
And then I will list, because I have a tendency to get sort of overwhelmed by all the things that I feel like need to be done. And part of that's that control piece about, that pray and move your feet, the double-edged sword part of that, is I think I have to take care of all of it. And I realized, especially through this process, when so many things happened that clearly I had not done, I really realized that I can discern what can I do and what can I just release to the universe and trust. And so writing it down in that way, it is a prayer and release. I can do this. I can make my doctor's appointments. I can invoice these clients. I can draw this design. I can, whatever, schedule these podcast interviews. I can't get my book in the hands of, the biggest platform people. I can't lift the pandemic so that bookstores have more access. That is God's job. And I have felt like this book has been divinely guided for years, not the whole time, but probably the last 3 or 4 years. And it's been a struggle for me, to lose this big, blast and media and coast to coast book tour and everything. That has been hard. But what keeps me centered is that I know that if my book was ever divinely guided, it is still divinely guided. And that goes in the universe's column. So
yeah, that's right. Like Veronica, yay! Everybody, like that was a really good tool. I could see that in Reverend Linda's book around forgiveness, having two sides like that. That was beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
And have you got one more spiritual practice?
well, the other one is the sort of obvious one coming from me, but it is the very mindful way in which I am in nature. So somebody asked me in another interview, well, do you read outside or whatever? And I'm like, no, when I'm in nature, I am in nature. And I love, if you follow Veronica on social media, I love the way she does that. She's very mindful in nature.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's exactly how I exist in nature, because I believe that nature speaks to us all the time. That I believe that the universe gives us messages through many, many, many kinds of messengers. And the one that I am most tuned into is the natural world. But you can't get the message if you're on your phone or have a headset in, or or even talking to a friend. So the mindful being in nature, I feel like, is both calming and, opens us to divine guidance. I went out with some friends to socially distance, but to see the comet the other night. So we drove out of the city lights, and then we just, it's far away, it's small, it was cool. But what was really amazing was just being able to see the night sky, seeing how quiet it was, seeing how dark it was. And there were lots of shooting stars, lots of meteors. And we all agreed that we felt so much calmer just having been in that space for however long we were there, an hour. So yeah.
Perfect. I love that. And, I'm actually thinking I might even leave Facebook Live going while we have our discussion, because how we close is then we open it up and let the others, would you be open to that? Ask you a few questions, anything?
Sure.
All right. Well, before I say that we're finished, I highly recommend 100 Daffodils. The book changed my life. I've read a lot of transformation books. And I recommend getting it. Go to Amazon, pick up. She doesn't have it on her website. I did ask. And one last thing that you also mentioned, that it was going to be at the art gallery in Dallas. Can you share that for a quick sec before we open it up?
Yeah, it's actually available everywhere, every kind of bookstore, every kind of audio access globally. It was a global release. So yes, the Dallas Museum of Art has a literary branch that is called Arts and Letters Live. And I'm super, super, super honored to have been asked to do a program with them, because they really, I'm sure I'm the only person they've ever had that's not famous. So, they're—
You are famous now. We see that.
Yeah, you declared it. So that is August 4th. And if you buy the book through the Dallas Museum of Art, then you sort of get a double whammy of, you get the book and you get to support the museum, which is a beautiful museum, even if it's not your museum. So yeah, that's a great place to get it, but it's also available at Amazon and, Bookshop and Indiegogo, or not Indiegogo, but IndieBound, and any independent bookstore. I mean, anywhere that you want to buy it, it is available. So
very nice. So would anyone like to ask a question? Thank you very much, Rebecca.
Thank you.
So go ahead, unmute. We'll just, Reverend Veronica.
I'm just loving Rebecca up, because I know Rebecca and her book is exquisite. And not just because I know Rebecca, I've already read the book 3 times. Wow. And the first time I read from page to page, and then the way that the book is written in the essays, literally, then I read it again the second time. The third time was like, I just picked up spots, where I would just be guided. And the thing that I read was exactly what I needed to read, so So in your writing process, can you share a little bit more about maybe people who, maybe don't have a practice of writing? How has it supported you, or maybe ways to inspire them? It's more like, what would be one inspiration you would share for either a person who's not a writer or maybe doesn't consider themselves a writer, and how that process of writing supported you in your revelation and your spirituality? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. So I know that you, Veronica, have done morning pages from The Artist's Way religiously for decades. And that was actually how I started this journaling process also. So the prologue, both pieces in the prologue of this book were morning pages.
Really?
They were literally morning pages.
Wow, I know that book. I did that for quite a while too. The Artist's Way, yes.
Yeah. And so
Can you share with them what the morning pages are first before you go on?
I don't actually think I did them right, because I think you're just supposed to like offload everything that's kind of on your mind. And I didn't do that. I mean, because you've read those first two pieces are actually probably two of the most esoteric pieces in the whole book. There are a couple of others, but that was just what came through. I was at the Dallas Arboretum. I had gone there early one morning just to get away, and I actually wrote both of those in the same day. So, there are people that say you should write for an hour every day. That has never really been something that works for me. If I am writing for a purpose, then I need to be just doing that. I can't even drop in to my higher self that fast and then drop out, So I did do those morning pages, but I've never had that sort of hour a day writing practice. I set aside time for any sort of creative endeavor, any sort of meditative endeavor, any sort of, spiritual practice, which I consider writing. If you're able to do that, what works best for me is to have it be an open-ended time, because if things start flowing,
I'm sorry, my timer just went off. I gotta stop. Right, exactly.
Sorry.
No, I'm kidding. That's what I mean. I'm making a joke that if I was writing and all of a sudden my timer went off and I stopped.
That's hysterical.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my God, I talked too long.
That was funny. Oh my gosh.
But that was a perfect ending about allowing the flow to continue, that openness. So thank you for sharing that. Yeah,
because it really can stop you. Well, let's do two more, because then we got to do our prayer. Somebody else want to ask a question of Rebecca? Go ahead and unmute. Is that Reverend Linda unmuting? Thought it was.
I will. I love what you had to share, and especially about writing, because I am one that sets a timer, but I also know when the timer goes off that it's my choice whether I continue or not. But it does. I mean, as Reverend Jayne mentioned, I am writing a book, and I hadn't done anything on it for about 6 months, and I got reactivated a month ago, and I have worked at least some on it every day today for the last month. And I'm so happy.
Yeah.
Because I'm back in the flow again.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of the sheet of paper of this is mine and this is God's. The process you were talking about pray and move your feet. What I had to learn the difference of when I became a minister was making things happen and allowing things to happen. And to me, it's a really big difference, and putting it on the sheet of paper is the way for it to be visual. This is mine to make happen, and this is mine to allow happen, to create the space for it to come together. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, I loved it. Now, Debbie, you wanted to share something? Yes.
Yeah, so I'm also working on a book. I've been working on it for a couple of years.
Nice.
And I'm off and on, much like Reverend Linda said, but I finally reached a point where I've reached sort of I figure my project, you know, if you've done project management, you know that when you've reached a certain point in the project, it's hard to explain, but I'm there. And I went and I reread the whole thing, and I was, some of it I was like, wow, who wrote that? I wrote that. Oh, and so I was kind of surprised, but it sounds like it's kind of similar to what you've written. I'm a landscape and nature photographer, so
Wow.
I spend a lot of time out in nature myself. And so, you know, I definitely want to get your book. I've kind of been going about it a different way than most people do, in that I write each day, and then I allow, you know, spirit to say it. It almost feels like automatic writing in a way to me. And so I don't know. I've got it all separated out into chapters, but I'm not sure what it's about yet. So I know that sounds really backwards, but
No,
that's
not at
No
all.
bad, no bad, no.
Yeah.
Rebecca, give her some encouragement on that.
please.
Because I will tell you that because my book is a collection of essays, and I always saw it that way because they had started out as journal entries, and because I had written some of those over years. And so they didn't sort of fit neatly into a timeline, and sometimes there were multiple ones where I was writing about the same, you know, crisis point, because I didn't just pop right out of it because I'd written about it, you know. And so so I really thought that was what that book was going to look like. It was just going to be a collection of essays, no particular order. I don't know. I didn't really think about it that much.
Right.
That is something that a publisher really does help you with, and an editor, you know, if you choose to self-publish, I highly recommend that you have a professional editor. I actually have an amazing one that I can recommend to you that I met. She was with a Random House imprint, and she was interested in buying my book, which is how I know her. But now she's on her own freelancing. But they can really help you with that, because like I said, I thought mine was just going to be, you know, this little basket full of, you know, wisdom thoughts.
Yeah,
They're
right.
like, yeah, no, the collection needs to have an emotional arc. And so I didn't say this earlier, but I think it bears saying, I'd never taken a writing class. I'd never even taken a writing workshop in my life. I did not have the vocabulary. I didn't have any tools. I didn't know anything about that world. And so when they said the collection needs an emotional arc, like, I understood those words, but I didn't have any idea how to do that. And so that process was actually quite challenging for me, but I was very fortunate to have not only a fantastic editor, but also my agent was a huge editor at a Random House imprint for 20 years, and she sold 51 New York Times bestsellers when she was an editor. So I actually had, you know, sort of this embarrassing wealth of great editors at my fingertips that helped me with that. But I will tell you that if you can start now thinking of the collection in terms of having an emotional arc, you'll be further down the road to preparedness, because they will definitely want that.
Yay, look at that.
Great to hear.
Great.
Thank you. This is perfect timing for me. Thank you.
You are most welcome.
I'm going to stop the Facebook. Thank you, everyone that joined us on Facebook Live. Have a blessed day.